Please be aware, in this podcast series we talk about all areas of safeguarding, which some people may find upsetting. So please make sure you're okay listening to today's topic. Be mindful of those around you, such as children, that you might not want to listen in. Hi, I'm SSS Safeguarding Director Sam Preston.
And I'm former head teacher and content author Sarah Spinks.
Hello and welcome back to Safeguarding Conversations, where we explore the real issues shaping safeguarding practice in schools and colleges. Today we're talking about something that often sits quietly in the background of safeguarding, but it's absolutely critical. The systems that allow schools to see risk early and clearly. And that phrase, seeing risk, is really important because safeguarding isn't just about responding to concerns when they present or they're obvious.
Exactly. In safeguarding, what you don't see can matter just as much as what you do see. So schools rarely fail children because staff don't care. They fail when systems don't allow patterns, concerns, or warning signs to be visible early enough. Or to the right people.
So effective safeguarding systems, they're not just administrative tools, are they?
No, they're a core child protection function. And I learned that very early during the COVID lockdowns when I was still a head teacher.
Because, overnight schools lost their most powerful safeguarding tool, didn't they, by simply seeing children every day?
Absolutely. And when the schools closed in 2020, the usual everyday safety nets disappeared. Teachers weren't seeing children arriving tired, withdrawn or distressed. There were no corridor conversations, no lunchtime disclosures, no quiet check-ins.
And those small moments are often where safeguarding concerns first emerge, aren't they?
Oh, they really are. You might notice a bruise, a change in behaviour, or a child simply looking overwhelmed. And without those everyday interactions, the eyes-on safeguarding system disappeared overnight.
And schools still knew which children were already classified as vulnerable, such as those on child protection or child in need plans.
Yes, and those pupils were prioritised for in-school attendance. But the big question was, what about everyone else?
Absolutely, because, vulnerability doesn't neatly fit inside categories, does it?
No, exactly. Domestic abuse, parental mental health difficulties, financial hardship, addiction or emotional neglect don't stop because a child isn't on a formal safeguarding plan.
So your school, Sarah, developed a system, didn't it? And to maintain that visibility across the community. Could you maybe say a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. We did. So every year group was allocated a trained member of support staff. They weren't just casual welfare calls. The staff involved were trained mental health first aiders who had safeguarding responsibilities.
And they were given clear tools to carry out that role.
Very much so. So they had a school mobile phone, a structured calling rota, conversation prompts to guide discussions, and clear escalation routes to the safeguarding team.
And I'm assuming every family in school was contacted?
Every single family, not just the ones already known to services, not just the ones labelled as vulnerable. Every family received a weekly call.
So that must have created a completely different picture of what families were experiencing during lockdown.
It really did. Some families were coping well. Others were struggling quietly with isolation, financial pressure or emotional stress. And occasionally we uncovered more serious concerns around domestic conflict, mental health or safeguarding risk.
And those conversations, they weren't just informal chats, were they?
No, they were very carefully recorded. Every conversation was logged and linked directly to our safeguarding tracking system.
So the DSL and deputy DSLs, they could then see what was happening across the whole school.
Exactly. And they could see which families had been contacted, what had been discussed, whether concerns were emerging and whether situations were improving or deteriorating.
So that really effectively created a real-time safeguarding map of the entire school community, didn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly what it felt like. And the key point is that no individual staff member could have spotted the patterns alone. The system allowed us to connect the dots.
So what kind of patterns started to emerge, Sarah?
Well, small changes that became significant when you saw them together. For example, a parent who had seemed fine the previous week but suddenly sounded withdrawn. A child who stopped joining calls, for example. A family moving gradually from stress into crisis.
I'm really struck by how that, we talk about that small piece of the jigsaw in safeguarding, don't we?
Yeah.
Because those in themselves, those might look like isolated events, if you only saw one piece of information.
Exactly. But when those pieces were linked through a safeguarding system, they became trends rather than individual incidents.
And trends are what allow schools, it's what enables them to intervene early.
Yeah, and the system helped us escalate concerns quickly, making referrals based on evidence rather than instinct and a coordinated support across the staff team.
It's interesting. I'm presuming that families didn't feel monitored or judged.
No, I think that was really important to us. Families often told us that they felt supported rather than scrutinised. They knew someone was checking in, noticing when things changed and offering help if that was needed.
So the system effectively combined two things, didn't it? Human contact and strong safeguarding oversight.
Exactly, and that combination is what made it effective.
So that was all during lockdown. Fast forward to today, and safeguarding challenges have become, you could say, even more complex.
Yeah, they have. Schools now deal with online harms, peer-on-peer abuse, child-on-child abuse, exploitation risk, trauma, mental health crises and neglect that can be hidden behind digital lives.
And that's a huge amount of information for any DSL to manage.
Yeah, it really is. No safeguarding lead can hold all of that information in their heads, and no pastoral team can reliably identify patterns across hundreds of records without support.
I'm just thinking this is why modern safeguarding increasingly relies on systems that help professionals see that bigger picture, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So tools like the concern tracker that we've developed, with SSS Learning are designed to support that visibility.
And it is important to say, these systems, they're not designed, and we certainly didn't design ours to replace professional judgment.
No, they strengthen it.
Yeah.
A good safeguarding system allows DSLs to see concerns in one place, track actions and outcomes, identify patterns across pupils and families, and report clearly to leaders and governors. And it's about that information that comes from all sectors of your staff team that then provide those trends and those jigsaw pieces that could be placed in one place.
And I think the other aspect, when you were saying that, just made me think as well, because one of the things that I think is a really big challenge is it's in the ongoing management where you've maybe got lots of things happening for each individual child and lots of those individual children. And it's just remembering, it's how you keep track of who you need to check in with. If you've asked somebody to monitor something for a period of time, you really need a system that is actually going to help you with that side of it. And, that in turns really makes the safeguarding decision making more confident and evidence based, doesn't it?
Definitely, definitely. And the aim isn't tracking data for its own sake. It really isn't. It's about ensuring nothing important is missed.
Exactly. So I'm just I'm feeling really reflective about what you were saying about the experience of lockdown safeguarding. What's the biggest lesson do you think you took from that lockdown safeguarding experience, Sarah?
Well, I think what was really important that the weekly phone calls enabled us to triage. And so therefore we had certain parents that we in the end phoned every day because they were triaged as being vulnerable or having circumstances that made them more vulnerable and therefore their children more vulnerable. But it also reinforced something fundamental for us. Safeguarding doesn't fail because people stop caring. It fails when systems stop seeing.
And that's a really powerful way to put it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the most effective safeguarding tool a school can have isn't just a policy document or a checklist. It is a system that ensures every child is visible, every concern is recorded and every pattern can be recognised.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Whether that's through logging your weekly phone calls during a pandemic or digital safeguarding systems in every school life.
Exactly, the principle's the same.
Yeah, because ultimately in safeguarding, you cannot protect what you can't see.
Yeah, and when schools
Yeah.
can see clearly, they're far better placed to protect children and support families.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Sarah, and thanks for sharing your experience in your school of that period during lockdown. That's all for today's episode. I hope you found that interesting. I certainly did. And please do join us for our next safeguarding conversation. Thanks for listening.